Welcome, everyone. My name is Greg. I am the men's coaching director, kind of a new position at LifePlan, and just grateful this evening to have Jay Pyatt with me. We are emphasizing this week what is known as WRAP, W-R-A-P, White Ribbon Against Pornography. And as we have talked at LifePlan, we recognize that the issue and the area of pornography is just a massive, massive issue that is probably far greater than most people would ever want to really admit. And so this evening, we're just blessed to be able to have a little conversation with Jay, and grateful for your presence, Jay. We just want to be able to ask kind of an open-ended question with two parts, and you can handle this however you want. But first of all, we want to know about your story, those areas that you feel are important to emphasize, but also the ministry that really has come from your experience. So I just want to throw it out to you, and we're excited to hear.
Okay, great. Thanks, Greg. Really appreciate you having me on. And this is an interesting connection between, where LifePlan was founded within the caring for pregnant women and alternatives to abortion and so on, to really the kind of the underlying issue, which is our sexual brokenness as people, and how that impacts our world. Primarily for me, my journey started when I was little. I found magazines back in the day when things were in magazines, and I knew I had a secret. No one had to tell me you can't really talk about this, and that started for me a 38-year relationship with pornography, with sensual material, with objectifying women as a source of feeding my flesh. And, as a young kid, as a young man, it was probably not terribly out of control. There are other elements of that, like masturbation came along, and being sexually active when I was 17 or so. And having expectations that was normal. Even though I went to church with my best friends when I was 12 years old and on, there was still something in me that pursued sex above God, above relationship. And so, and that's pretty common to the stories that we hear as we mentor men and women. We mentor the men who are addicted, and my wife mentors to the women who are really traumatized by what they've found that their husbands have been into. Because not only did I know that I had a secret when I was a little kid, I've kept a lot of secrets, and I've lied many, many times to my wife. And these were not just simple lies of omission. These were lies of, if I use porn today, I'll tell you tonight. And I would come home and I would tell her I didn't use porn today. And I told her that lie more than 1,000 times.
Yeah.
That does a lot of damage to a person and to a relationship. And, so my story, I thought for sure getting married would solve the problem. Even though I had been married once before Lori and I met, I was married once before, and it was an unhealthy marriage. I was really very broken, and she was a hurting person as well. And it didn't last very long, but even then, pornography was a part of that marriage. And I thought, well, it's just because it was unhealthy. So a healthy marriage with God at the center, porn won't be an issue. And I had convinced myself that I would be willing to tell Lori, because I was telling her before we got married that I had an issue. So I knew, I felt like in marriage, I'd be able to tell her. And I was wrong about both of those things.
Okay.
So back in, well, we got married in 1995. The downside was I worked in the computer field. So before the internet came online, I had all of the setup to get on the internet. I was finding porn in other places before the internet came online. And person that I know that has done a lot of work in this area, Donna Rice Hughes, she tried to get Congress to pass a number of laws because she said the first day that the internet came online, everything you could find in pornography was already out there.
Wow.
It became, and so many people said, yeah, I was doing okay until the internet came online.
Mm-hmm.
And, you're probably familiar as I am that back then it was, it took a little while. A picture took 2 or 3 minutes to load and you had to be pretty patient, and video didn't exist yet. And now moving into the world where pornography is in your pocket potentially all day long. Yeah. I just spoke to a young man that's 15 last week. He reached out to me. He said, I don't know who to talk to. I feel like the only person who has this problem. And I said to him, you're not the only person that has this problem. You're just the first one that realizes it's not working for you anymore. Mm-hmm. And so those are the guys we try to help. Typically, it's a lot like my story, which is my wife confronted me. I eventually confessed, and things are in a really bad state, is typically when guys come to me. I've had a few that realized, no, I need a way out of this, and they've come to me before. So we work with men who have come out of long-term problematic porn use or addiction. And if their spouses are needing help, they can reach out to Lori, and then Lori works with them from what we call the trauma model. Trauma being, when you have been in a place that's unsafe for a prolonged period of time, that can create trauma.
Yeah.
And what I like to tell people is the guys that came home from Afghanistan, we could tell them, you're safe now. Nobody's going to try to hurt you here. Lori's problem was she was still sleeping with the bad guy. I was the guy that did all the damage. And so she didn't know whether or not to trust me. Right. And so that leads to this sense of, am I okay? Am I okay? And so it's very difficult for the women sometimes to get help. I know there's a lot of well-meaning, well-intentioned people who have said awful things to spouses. Mm-hmm. Having more sex is not a solution. Mm-hmm. Dressing differently is not a solution. Watching porn with him is not a solution. All of those things just make it so much worse. Anyway, so that's where we begin in our ministry, is typically trying to help the wife figure out which way is up, and trying to help the guy to, deal with life in an effective way, and step into this place of seeing his wife as hurt, scared, and really uncertain.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that, as I've gone on your webpage, and we're going to be letting people know how to get some good information and maybe get connected with you as they would like to. The website is called thecouplecure.com, and we'll make sure, if you're tuning in today, that you can make sure to get that clearly. But one of the things that has really impressed me, Jay, about your ministry with Lori is really Lori's is side by side with you. I mean, it's a team effort, and I think it requires that because of this is not just dealing with the guy's problem. And we know that women also struggle with pornography. It's probably not quite as prevalent because of the way women are just wired so different than men. But at the same time, Lori's role in this and having a woman that has really, been right there in the trenches with you, makes I think your ministry so strong and attractive to people, because it's not just something to deal with the guy. It's also it really has to be a holistic approach.
Yes.
Interesting question as you were talking. I think there's probably a misunderstanding out there that pornography is just kind of a young person's problem or addiction.
Right.
In recent years, I've met some men myself that are well into their 50s and even in their 60s. Are you discovering the same thing, that this is, unless it is stopped, it just continues on for well into what we would consider the beginnings of older age?
Right.
Is that what you're experiencing as well, as far as?
Yeah. So Greg, the youngest person that's reached out to me is 15 years old. The oldest person that's reached out to me was 68, 69 years old.
Yeah.
And I've had all stages in between, single men, married men, divorced men, that recognize that they're not getting the traction that they needed, and they were kind of thinking at some point this would go away as well.
Right.
And for some people it does. For some people, they're just kind of like, yeah, that's not really my thing anymore. And I think that's true of most things that we can find addictive. Sometimes we grow out of them, and sometimes this becomes something we've trained our brain through dopamine. Our brains, use the chemical dopamine, and it helps us feel good. And there are a number of things that release dopamine in our body, and so we've trained ourselves to find dopamine through a certain process. And until we break that process, until we find another way to do it, it's really hard to convince ourselves that we don't, quote unquote, need it.
Yeah. And the science behind it really is quite compelling as well. When you think about, I was reading some articles recently about even for kids that are into like video games, they get a very similar type of dopamine release, which their dopamine levels are at such a high level that when they are not doing that, their body is telling them, no, we need to get back up there. We need to get back up there, which of course is the cycle of addiction, really. It's like, and then what you did before, that wasn't quite good enough. And now you've got to move into new areas. And with pornography, I'm sure that there can be an escalation of that as well, where maybe you started out with more soft porn, and of course, a lot of what you see in TV and videos now are really elements of soft pornography, and then how it can escalate. But one of the things I thought was interesting that I wanted to ask you about, and I'm really in agreement with you on this, but I know that when you talk about the issue of pornography, you often use the word addiction, or people that are addicts. Can you just share with us a little bit of why you think that's an important word to use as we're talking about an issue like pornography?
Right. Well, first and foremost, I want to go to what the AA Big Book says, which is no one can tell us that we're an addict. It's something we decide for ourselves. But it's something we decide when we realize I'm powerless over this. And what I mean by powerless is I know this could end my marriage. I know this could end my job. I know this could damage my ministry that I work, and have been contacted by a number of pastors. I know this could damage my ministry, and I'm still going to use it. There's something in me that says, no, I'm still going to go down this road, even though I know it's going to hurt me, which is why my first website is called Porn is Killing Me.
Mm-hmm.
I've had people tell me porn isn't killing you. Porn can't kill you. And I've had people call me and tell me they were suicidal because they didn't know how to stop. And we've seen in the news, the man earlier this year that shot people at a massage parlor because he could not end his repeated habit of going there. And so, he went to a very extreme measure. And that's really sad that we can get to that point, but that is why I think we need to address it as an addiction than just simply an obsession or, whatever. I think it can be much more than that. For some people, it's not, the guy that uses porn every once in a while may or may not be an addict. It really depends on, what consequences is he facing, and he doesn't care.
Right.
What's the why behind it? And so it makes a little bit more complicated issue, but I think most guys know, this is not something I'm going to stop on my own.
Right. Right. Well, if Lori was right by your side right now, and she had an opportunity to speak into this, what do you, and I'm sure you would know what she would say, what would be some things that Lori would feel would be very important to share, in just thinking about maybe women out there that are, that has husbands or boyfriends or whatever the situation, or even to either an addict or even someone who just delves into pornography on occasion. What are some things that you think Lori would say that would bring kind of that female perspective to the issue?
Right. It is okay to be upset by this. It's okay to be hurt by this. I think many women within our society, if you're not in the church, the world around us tells us, oh yeah, porn's okay, everybody does it, whatever.
Yeah.
Within the church, there's quite a few responses like, well, that's just boys being boys. And the women are kind of left in this place of, wait a minute, this doesn't feel right to me. I feel like I should be really upset, but you're telling me, well, no, not really. And Lori, I think, would also say, if the guy had an affair, most women would know, okay, we're done. That is clearly a violation of marital vows and so on. Pornography walks in this kind of gray area of what it feels like betrayal, but it's kind of not. And honestly, we've seen women come to us where the man has been to prostitutes, massage parlors, the whole thing. The woman's really upset, but we've also seen women whose husband was just using porn, and she's a mess. It's really created a lot of unhealthy dynamics. Right. So I think that's the first thing is, number one, you can be upset about this. Number two, you're going to need a multiple step game plan. Okay. Because, we kind of followed a number of different things. All the normal responses. We went to therapy. I went to an accountability group. I went to, men's prayer, all those kind of things. And they helped a little, but they weren't necessarily the solution. So gathering resources, gathering tools. That's one of the reasons why Lori is so good at what she does, is she's been gathering tools to deal with me for the last almost 27 years.
Okay.
And so she knows, like, okay, if this happens, you respond this way and so on. But coming up with a multi-step game plan, more so than the guy just saying, well, I'll go to a 12-step meeting, or I'll go to Celebrate Recovery, or there needs to be some other evidence of things going on.
Yeah. I know one thing you, in listening to some of your podcasts, you talk about kind of customization of, there are times when this is where your ministry, I think, really is wonderful. You're able to kind of tailor it to the particular person. If you think of, let's say, the last 10 guys that kind of reached out to you, how much of it is, how much are they similar and how much are they different? I mean, can you speak to that customization? Because I like that. I think just the fact that we're all different, we all respond differently, would make sense that we just can't have a one size fits all to really actively addressing and helping men and women out there.
Yeah. The out of the last 10 guys,
you can spin that however you want, or you can ask a different question. So feel freedom to.
Yeah. Well, so I do have people reach out to me that they have a spiritual walk, but they're not really Christians. So that takes a little bit different approach of talking to them about, like a 12-step program would, a higher power, something bigger than yourself.
Right.
So that takes a little bit of a tweak, not a huge one. Some men are, they haven't told their wife yet. I've had a few that are like, okay, I need to tell my wife, help me out here, and that's much different than they've already tried to tell their wife, and things are what on fire is, for lack of a better, things are very broken down at that point. And for one thing, I tell every guy that comes to me, I'm not going to keep your secrets for you. We're going to set up a pattern of telling your story to your wife. Now, if he hasn't done what we call a therapeutic disclosure, then we try to work him in that direction. And a therapeutic disclosure is not something we do because it's something done with a therapist who is there to support the spouse, and another therapist who is there to help the addict discover what he needs to tell her. And that's where most of this can get very problematic, because sometimes the guy doesn't want to tell anything. He says, okay, you caught me, I'll stop, and we won't talk about it anymore. But the wife is over there thinking, no, I need to know. I need to, what happened? What, was it this? Did you do this? And if you start doing searches about pornography addiction, it becomes very easy to think, oh, my husband's going to go to jail. Because most of the stories out there about the whole porn addiction thing that make the news tend to end in that, in that scenario. That's not always the case, but for someone who's trying to figure out, okay, how upset should I be? How scared should I be? What, all of those issues need to be brought to the surface, and they need to be done in a really healthy way. Once, if they've already been through a disclosure, or if there's been a partial disclosure like what I did, which is typically what we call drip fed truth. It's like, oh yeah, I remember this, and oh yeah, I remember this. And so for the woman, it's like day after day after day of new revelations that are very painful.
Yeah, like, oh boy. Yeah,
Yeah,
like death by 1,000 cuts. I mean, yeah.
right, right.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Okay.
that's why we want the woman to have the support of a therapeutic disclosure.
Right.
Again, not something we do, but it's something we recommend.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
and for some guys, they um, honestly, they kind of like me in 2010 when Lori confronted me. I had already been clean maybe a month or so, and um, I haven't used since.
Hmm.
I've been tempted. I've done some things that have kind of skirted the edges.
Hmm.
Uh, Not recently, but that was something that was I was pretty well done with it. And some guys are there, and some guys continue to struggle.
Yeah.
So that's another way in which it's kind of specific to the person: is he struggling? Is he not? Um,
Right.
and either way, um, I wish I could say that just solving the porn problem solves the problem.
Right.
And it really doesn't.
Yeah.
It's a symptom of a
Hmm.
deeper issue, which is where you and Lyndon stepped in with LifePlan, is that there's a deeper issue behind the sexual brokenness in America.
Right.
Pornography is an indicator. Um, Unwanted pregnancy is an indicator. There's other indicators here.
Hmm.
And so once you peel off the layer of pornography, there are other layers, you
Right.
know.
Right.
So that then is where things get, again, more specific. And while I'm not a therapist and can't delve into childhood issues and all these other things, we do
Right.
talk about, what's your relationship like with your parents,
Yeah.
because that plays into it. Um,
Yeah.
Primary caregivers impact our lives, and typically
Right.
that's where most men find it, is at home.
Mm.
Some of them don't, but most of them do.
Yeah. Yeah. It's um it's pretty amazing. I mean, I reflect back on even my own life. I had great parents, godly parents. And it was a neighbor friend, that took me to his house, and he had found his older brother's magazines, and that was my first exposure. I'm grateful that I had very little exposure. Um, and so I praise God for that. Not everybody has that experience, but I wanted to maybe just kind of end our time with giving people a sense of hope. At LifePlan, we share the gospel with people when the door opens. We believe that is one of the greatest decisions that you can make in life, if not the greatest. But then also to leave people with a sense of hope so they can live a hope-filled life. But um, two more questions. One is just about how has this journey, which I can only imagine the pain that both you and Lori have walked through, the deep dark valley that you've walked through. But how has it positively, now that you're through, you know through it, or through the worst of it, let's say it that way,
Yeah.
um, how has it changed your marriage?
Well, for me, it was really the first time in my life I didn't carry that secret anymore.
Mhm.
I was fully known. I was accepted, in a way that um, was um, not experienced in my past. I was accepted in a way that I hadn't um, felt or heard or seen. Um, for Lori, incredibly painful, a long process of rebuilding trust. Um, However, there were places where I stepped back into life so much of what I was doing was just taking me away from the relationship, keeping me from engaging fully. So things like interactions with the family, changed. Interactions just in doing some of the basic chores around the house changed.
Yeah.
I could see that things needed to be done and I could do them. And in time, she had told me I had made it right. It took time.
Right.
And it was a painful process. And there's still moments where things are not, they're not perfect. We're still both human.
Right.
And we now have some of the skills we need to navigate it better, and we always look for more skills, more tools, because we've peeled off a whole lot of layers of the onion.
Yeah.
So I think for us, that's where it's changed, is life is not so withdrawn for me. And for Lori, she has someone who can come alongside her and participate in a way that I hadn't been before.
Right. Great. Well, that's good. I'm sure the status of your marriage, I mean, as far as the trust level, you mentioned the trust level, that's got to be at a very, rebuilding it, of course, it takes a moment to destroy it, and it takes literally a lifetime to really keep rebuilding it. But I'm grateful to God for the work He's done in your lives. A final question, and then if there's something else you want to address, I just welcome you to speak freely. But if there's a guy listening, to this interview, if there is that is either struggling with pornography, or a friend that has a friend that really is struggling, or even a wife. I mean, I imagine there'll be some ladies that'll want to listen to this, and that's a good thing too. What would you want to share with them, to give them a sense of hope about the future, that this is not the final straw, that this is not a completely hopeless thing? What would you want to say to them?
Right. There's a lot, and it's one of those where I'd love to have this snappy little saying of, and follow it up with a couple of finger guns or something, so that you guys are like, yeah. But
right. I understand.
The reality is that you get life back.
Okay.
So much of my time was spent disconnected from people, disconnected from God, disconnected from reality.
Yeah.
And even after porn, I still found that in video games or television or, other avenues. And that sense of disconnection, really what it spoke to for me, and I think it can speak to other men. There is a purpose for your life. God has a purpose for your life. And that is not to take the trash out on Monday nights or to do the dishes. That purpose is something about who you are.
Yeah. And
it's easy to get caught up in I'm just going to distract myself. I really don't want to look at the pain of my life. I don't want to look at just the boredom of things being kind of normal. And you know, the subtitle on one of my websites is Live a Bigger Life, you know, and that's not, you know, to have the house and the cars and all that. That's to have a life that's bigger than the screen in front of you.
Right.
You know, and that life has so much more to offer than the very limited escape of pornography. You know, one of the there's an author out there named Jay Stringer. He's written a really fantastic book called Unwanted. And where was I going with this? Living a Bigger Life. Wow. It just,
It's all right.
Went straight out. Anyway, in that book, he does talk about this kind of dynamic of getting stuck in the screen.
Yeah.
And I fully agree with that there's a life out there that's so much bigger, more healthy, more engaging. But, you know, the screen kind of, it just feeds what I call the cockroach in my brain. It feeds the little cockroach. And when that's over, that's what it was. When that's over, a big part of what I get is this really icky feeling of shame and despair, and I'm a failure. And there's kind of a part of us that's addicted to that too. You know, we want something to continue to tell us that, yeah, you're really not anything. And that's the enemy speaking, right? That's the enemy continuing to tell us that we don't have a purpose. We're not going to have an impact. And it can be broken. You can break that cycle. People do it every day. And it's not easy. I was training for one of my 2 marathons. I am not a big time runner. I ran a couple of marathons, but I was training for that. Training for a marathon is nothing compared to the work I had to do to heal my marriage, to get away from porn, to do those kind of things. And so it's not going to be easy, but it is valuable. You know.
Well, praise God. Well, Jay, again, I want to thank you for your transparency, your willingness to keep sharing your story. I think that in and of itself is probably therapeutic in a way, to keep telling it, to see that where God has taken you from and keeps taking you, and just thank you to both you and Lori for the ministry you have. Just want to thank everybody. I want to remind everybody again, and we will be getting more information on our Facebook page at least. The website that you'll want to look for to get lots of great blogs and podcasts, and a way to connect directly to either Jay or Lori, is thecouplecure.com. So just go to your favorite search engine, and thecouplecure.com, all is one word.com, and you can find them there. But again, Jay, just want to thank you for your time. Your ministry really fits into the heart and soul of where we want to be at LifePlan, and we look forward to having an ongoing relationship with you guys in the future. So I pray that you have a great evening, and we'll hopefully be in touch.
All right.
Thanks.
Thanks, Greg.
Yeah.